So you can see from the earlier tests that Louis kind of started out cartoony. You know, he started out.
Can I have a picture, please?
If you could.
Yeah. So he started out kind of cartoony, and actually even the eyeglasses were a vestige of an earlier plot point. Originally, he had been a nerdy human who had been turned into an alligator by Dr. Facilier, but we dropped that for simplification purposes, and he became, you know, an alligator who was enamored of jazz because he heard it on the riverboats, you know, passing by. So he eventually evolved into this. Well, not quite. He eventually evolved into this. But we really had to go back and look at real alligators. You know, one thing that we did is we had a design retreat, which meant that we all got together and drew all over each other's drawings, you know, to try and hone these things, you know, to make a unified cast. And what was happening, you know, amongst my colleagues is everyone was feeling Louis wasn't gatory enough. So I really did have to go back. We looked at some neat National Geographic footage and other things. I really had to study a gator's construction. And Louis eventually came out, you know, more of a realistic alligator, but still with the same kind of charm and personality quirks that you see in that first test. Basically, Louis is a study in contrasts. He's nervous as anything. He's got all of these phobias and all that kind of stuff, but he is absolutely in his element when he plays his jazz. So one thing I noticed in my earlier drawings was that I was putting the mouth directly under the eyes, you know, like a human character. And when I looked at the gator footage and all the stills, I noticed the jaw was hinged all the way back here. So automatically, once I did that, he started to look much more like a real gator. There are certain things like the gator has this little pouch here around the mouth. So I went ahead and caricatured that as a kind of secondary cheek for him and brought that, you know, I had to make his nose flatter, more gator-like, his nostrils more gator-like. And a gator has this great big bull neck as well. So even if I was drawing his cranium here, then I had to put this whole part underneath it, you know. And it's interesting when you're animating, you have to kind of define what's soft and what's hard. So for example, when I'm animating his chin, that's hard. But when I'm animating this stuff on his neck, we animate that in a more fleshy way. So eventually, he became much more gator-like. And of course, one thing that's a big deal about gators is that they have these huge bodies and these very tiny arms and hands. And we thought that was a nice element for humor on him too. Now, like I said, he's a study in contrast. One thing that came, you know, that was great inspiration was that Michael Leon Woolley was cast to do his voice. Michael has this great booming voice, and for those of you who don't know him, he's a Broadway actor. He was the voice on, I think, the last revival of Little Shop of Horrors. He was the voice of Audrey 2, if you guys remember what that plant sounded like. But you can see, you know, that Louis is a bit of a study in contrast here. Here he's faking like he's dying because he got a pricker stuck in his finger. But eventually he winds up, you know, being the coolest thing ever and really being able to shake his body around when he's playing his jazz.